So I'm just going to do a quick video on the correct install procedure for the front wheel on a motocross bike. This is on a Honda CRF 250R. On the front wheel, some people may or may not know that there's actually a right way and a wrong way to put the front wheel on. So I'm going to show in this video the correct way to do it. I have to remind myself often how to do it as well, so I thought it would be a good idea to make a video, show the right way to do it so you don't get any binding of the forks when you've installed your front wheel. So on this bike, I'm going to start by removing the disc cover. I don't think any other motocross bikes are standard come with a disc cover. I think it's just the Honda, could be wrong. But you have to take this off to get to the pinch bolts and remove the front wheel. It's actually quite annoying having this and always having to remove it every time you need to do anything with the front axle or front wheel. But anyway, that's the way it is. So we've got the disc guard off. Now we're going to remove the axle nut. The axle nut on this bike is 22mm socket, so we'll get that taken off. Obviously going to torque it up again later, so I'm using the torque wrench. I've never had the front wheel off this bike because it's new, so everything should be nice and clean and slide in and out quite easily. Then we're going to loosen off the pinch bolts. And what are these? 10mm socket on the pinch bolts. They don't feel very tight at all. I think they're just 20 Newton meters on the pinch bolts. Okay, so we've got the pinch bolts off or loosened off on the right side. I'm just going to loosen them on the left side. Okay, so now we've got pinch bolts on both sides loosened off. So now should be able to just get the front axle out. I'm just pushing it with my hand on the right side. As I said, this bike's new, they won't always come out this easy. There we go, axle out. Obviously just drop the wheel out carefully, it's in between the brake pads of course. And that's the front wheel off. So yeah, and there's no grease on the axle. I mean, it doesn't make a massive difference, but while it's off the bike I'll put a bit of grease on it. But as I said, because this bike's new, if you're doing it on a bike you've used, it'd be good to give this a bit of a clean up first. It will be quite grubby, and then put a little bit of grease on it before you put it back on. So that's the axle greased up. So we're now going to put the front wheel back in. The trickiest part with this is you've got to hold the weight of the wheel, keep it steady and align it with the forks, and also get the disc in between the brake pads. So it can get a bit tricky, but you can put your leg under the wheel as you're doing it. So with the rear wheel obviously it'll be harder with a bit more weight there and the chain and everything to think about. It may be necessary to pry the brake pads apart a little bit. I think should be okay with this one. So I'm just spreading them out a bit by hand. But when you put the disc up, you can sort of manipulate them with the disc so that they sort of spread apart as you're putting the disc in. So now the disc is in between the pads. You want to try to put the wheel in roughly in line with the holes in the axle, for the axle, and then you can kind of get it all aligned as you're putting the axle in. So the axle's going in now, and on the other side I'm just wiggling it to get it aligned with the hole in the other fork leg. Can be a bit of a struggle, you don't want to hit it with anything metallic. There you go. So now we're going to tighten the axle nut. The torque setting on this bike is 88 Newton meters. It will probably be different across different bikes, but yeah, for this one 88. What we're doing here is we're tightening this axle nut and we're pulling the wheel and the fork lug against the wheel spacer, pulling it all together. So this is fixed on this side with the torque setting on the axle nut. And then the non-brake side is floating. So that allows us to align the forks in the next step. So in order to tighten this to the torque setting, you need to hold the axle in place. So one way to do that is to just nip up one of the pinch bolts on this side, the non-brake side, and that will hold the axle in place while we tighten this nut and pull this side together. You don't want to snug or tighten any of these pinch bolts on this side to do this, because that won't allow the fork lug in the leg to pull in against the wheel spacer and the wheel. So that could give you other problems. So yeah, pinch bolt on the other side, snug that up, and then we can torque this side to 88 Newton meters. So torque wrench is set to 88. There you go. And then don't forget, loosen off this side. And then, as I said, this side is then floating. So we'll move on to the next stage, which is aligning the forks. So as you can see, this side's kind of floating. So you can see that it moves in and out. So if you, let's say you avoided this step of pumping the forks, you could tighten the pinch bolts. I'm pushing on this now, pushing the fork leg out. You could end up tightening your pinch bolts and your axle nut and everything with them like that. And then those forks aren't going to be perfectly in line. So they might be closer together at the bottom or further away, further apart at the bottom. And then you'll get basically binding in the fork. So could get a harsh feeling and the forks just won't operate as they're supposed to. So by pumping the suspension with this loosened off, this will naturally find its home, which means it's nice and in line with the other fork leg. Another way you can do it is you can spin the front wheel and then put the front brake on, and that jolt will also help it find its natural position. I tend to pump the fork, so we'll do that as well, but this is another way you can do it. So we're going to take the bike off the stand to pump the fork. So just do it a few times. That's enough. Back on the stand. And we should be nice and aligned now. Okay, so we know we've got the axle nut torqued already. So we'll just torque the right side pinch bolts first. So torque wrench set to 20 Newton meters for these. Again, that could vary depending on the bike, so check your manual. Probably be similar. And you want to alternate between these to make sure you're not over tightening one before the other. There you go, that's that side done. We'll get the other side torqued up. Again, alternating between the bolts. I loosened them quite a bit more off on this side. There you go. Okay, and the last side is torqued. So, as I said, on this bike you've also got the disc cover to put on, which we'll do next. But with most of the bikes you won't need to do that. But now we know we've got the forks all aligned, pinch bolts tightened, axle nut torqued, and we're ready to go.